Hi everybody, it's Julie from Art for You, and today is our 5th week of our Monday painting class. And today we're going to be doing Lake Agnes. Let's go. I'm going to put these side by side. So just an example of how you can turn a realistic photograph into more of a Lawren Harris style semi-realism. So there's a few things that we do. We simplify shapes quite dramatically, but we also will exaggerate peaks and shapes. So you can see like this middle part, like I've kind of made the sweep down a bit more drastic, this kind of little lumpy bit, instead of making it, you know, graduated. I've just made it one dramatic shape. So kind of simplified but dramatized the shapes. And then with the snow, again, I've just picked out a few of the shapes and exaggerated this. So it's quite interesting because this is not my photograph. My photograph I couldn't find this morning because it's deep in the archives of many external hard drives. But the snow is actually very similar just on this peak from when I was there. So I just kind of really exaggerated the jaggedness of the snow. And then I just chose sort of 4 simple snowy shapes here on this lower segment. There was ice on, even though it was July, there was ice on the lake when I was there. So there was a little trickle of water coming through, and that was what was feeding Lake Louise. So you can see where there is a break in the ice. So again, I just simplified that. It's interesting that this little patch of snow here on the gravel is very similar to the patch of snow that was there when I was there. And then just on this little mound here, this little hill here, there was a few more patches of snow, as I say, even though it was July when I was there. I was very shocked. We all hiked up in shorts and t-shirt and it was snowing. So I think the tea house make a killing on unprepared tourists and they buy them lots of soup. So we had lots of hot soup. We were just freezing because we saw a sign, Lake Louise, saying tea house this way. We just followed the arrows. We had no idea it was another 3-hour hike directly uphill. We thought, oh, fancy a cup of tea. Let's go and have a cup of tea. 3 hours later, we found it. For those who've been to it, I know Susan, you know what the hike's like. Up there. So with regards to simplification of colors, when I was there it was very cold, so I wanted to give the feeling of cold. So I'm going to go through the colors that I chose now. So on the distant mountain I used Cobalt Blue. I did gray that down using raw umber. I'll go for all these again in a minute. For the mountain on the left, the darkest area, which I feel kind of looks like a killer whale, and that was accidental, my killer whale shape. And the killer whale inspired colors, I used Windsor Blue and raw umber. I darkened it with raw umber, so there's actually no black in this picture. It was all blues and browns to make those almost blacks. For the slight green tree representations, I used phthalo green with a little bit of Windsor Blue, and again grayed it down with brown with raw umber. And then for the water at the front, I used phthalo green and Windsor Blue, and again a bit of raw umber. So very limited color palette. For the sky, I did want to bring in a tiny bit of warmth into the sky. So as well as using my Windsor Blue and some white, I did bring in a little bit of cadmium yellow as well, just to kind of green that up a tiny bit. And I did also use a tiny bit of yellow ochre to warm it up. So it was very, very subtle. We are actually going to begin with the sky. So the steps we're going to use is we're going to begin with the sky. We're going to do the distant mountain, so this large peak right in the middle. And we're going to work our way forwards in layers, doing the water last. We're not going to worry about putting any of the snow on till everything is completely dry, and then it'll be a lot easier to do the whites. So so it's going to be quite simple shapes, but the emphasis we're going to have is on smoothness of lines and thick paint. So we may well need a couple of layers on each section. And the paintbrushes I'm going to use are a filbert for those rounded edges. So a combination of a large and a small flat filbert. And you see there's there's mostly smooth edges apart from some of this kind of jagged snow here. And then I'm going to be using a couple of different flats. But to start with, we're going to start with this light source, the kind of emphasis of the light coming out over the mountains and casting these kind of reflections on the snow. So you see this kind of French ultramarine. I don't know why they call it French ultramarine. It's just ultramarine. That's more on the purpley side. Then cobalt is next to it. Phthalo is closer to Windsor Blue. It's just got a little bit more of a greeny feel to it. Then you've got cerulean and turquoise. I've never come across manganese, so just ignore that. So cerulean and turquoise. So these are these have a little bit of white added to them. Turquoise is basically phthalo green with white in it. And cerulean is phthalo green, white, and phthalo blue. So ultramarine and cobalt and phthalo are kind of the ones without any white or any additives to them, as far as I'm concerned. So Windsor Blue is more on the phthalo side, so it's a tiny bit greener than the likes of ultramarine, which is more on the purpley side. So these are the paint colors that I've gone out. So I have raw umber or whatever brown you have. I have Cobalt Blue next, which is, say, a little bit slightly towards the warmer side, but it's quite close to ultramarine. Then I have phthalo green on the end here, and then Windsor Blue here. So I'll put those here. And then if you don't have a dark enough brown, you could bring in a little bit of paint gray or black as well. And then we need white, of course. So white, I put in a tiny bit of cadmium yellow, and this is my paint gray or black. So they're kind of that's the full color palette that we're going to be using today. And you can actually, I'm going to put out a little bit of yellow ochre as well. So you can put out a little bit of yellow ochre.
What's the first color on the left, the top left?
That is raw umber. Okay, so I'm gonna start. I'll do my mixing on the palette just to show you. You know, I like to mix like straight onto the canvas, but slightly tricky color to get first time. So I'm gonna put a little bit of my green. I'm going to keep it very much on the light side. So this will make your aqua green. So you basically, if you've got aqua green, just add some white to it. It's basically the same color. Okay, and then I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow ochre to that to warm it up. Cobalt blue, white, and then we're going to dull it down with a little bit of our raw umber. So I'm going to show you my little mixing tray again. And I'm going to be using a filbert. So white.
Yeah.
Cobalt blue. There's my cobalt blue. And then we're going to just grey it down with a little bit of raw umber. That just takes away the intensity of the blue, because the opposite to blue is orange. So our brown is kind of orange based. And it just greys down our blue a little bit. So that's a fairly good match there. Put a tiny bit more brown. We only need a little tiny bit of brown. If you add too much, it'll go very greeny. So white, cobalt blue, and a little bit of brown.
So let's start by putting in that mountain that's in the background. Basically start with a check mark, which is about 1 finger space from the top right hand corner. We're doing like an oval shape just beyond the center at the top. I've then put in a couple of marking points for myself for the other 2 peaks, so you can see how I'm just adding those in. This is layer 1. The second layer, I'll be bringing in a little bit of white where my sun's going to be peeking out from. So let's block it out first of all with that plain blue, and then the second layer we'll be adding a few little white highlights, which you will see me doing next. Another thing which I'm adding in now is my horizon line. So you can see I'm using my paintbrush to roughly measure the same distance. It's quite hard for us to draw a straight horizon line. We all have one eye higher than the other, so I tend to use a ruler or tape or just a paintbrush to help me get the measurement. It doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line. It's just about 1/3 from the bottom. As I mentioned before, I'm now adding some highlights for my second layer of my blue. So I'm putting in a little bit of white directly under my light source, and then I'm blending it down. I'm also going to add a little bit of that white on the inside of all my peaks, so that the left hand side, the side away from the light source, is slightly darker, and the side facing the light source is slightly lighter. The next thing we're going to do is add those, I call them killer whale mountains because the colours remind me of a killer whale, that kind of dark navy blue. So I've made the navy blue using Windsor Blue with a tiny bit of raw umber. If you don't have Windsor Blue because it's a brand name, you can also use Phthalo Blue. And you will need 2 coats for this. I'm using that same kind of killer whale blue, the Windsor Blue and the raw umber. but I'm going to thin it down with some water to sketch out the shapes of my water around the floating ice. Once you've done your sketch and you're happy where the water's going to go against the ice, then you can start filling that in. Same as we did with the background mountain, I'm starting with my pure Windsor Blue with a little bit of raw umber, so the same colour as the new mountains, but then I'm going to add a little bit of white as I get towards the bottom to make it a little bit lighter in the foreground. Again, probably need 2 layers for this. I'm then going to apply the slightly lighter blue that I'm putting in the foreground for 2 additional smaller mountains in front of those dark mountains I've just done.